Throughout history, our existence has been documented through the use of many different mediums, most of which were visual-based. This was because up until the last few hundred years or so, we had no effective way of recording sound in a reproducible format. Toward the end of the 17th century, the French had a crude method for transferring sound waves onto a cylinder that was playable on a machine called a phonograph, but it was almost inaudible and never quite caught on. It wasn't until 1877 that the phonograph was perfected by none other than America's sweetheart, Thomas Edison. One night, good old Eddie was playing around with his telegraph machine when he noticed that at high speeds the vibrations sounded like human speech. Hey! He took this new discovery and put it to use, improving the already existing phonograph, making it sound more crisp and less like a song from Skrillex. Let's flash forward a bit.
The year is 1926, you see, the age of jazz and prohibition. Phonographs are just old hat now, you hear? It's all about those fancy new-spangled vinyl records that got everyone's crickets in a jiminy.
That's right, it wasn't until the late 1920s, almost 100 years after Edison's phonograph, that the vinyl record consumed mainstream media. During the 1930s, the Great Depression put a bit of a halt to the audio industry. This was probably due to people wanting things like food and clothes for their families rather than better sound on their Bing Crosby records. It wasn't until the early 1940s that the next groundbreaking change in the audio industry was made: stereophonic sound.
If you're like many other Americans, you might be wondering, what in good golly gosh is stereophonic sound?
Well, Jane, mister, I was wondering that.
Well, you see, Timmy, stereophonic sound is achieved by using two independent audio tracks through a configuration of two or more audio sources in such a way to create the impression of sound heard from various directions, as in natural hearing.
I'm sorry, mister, I don't know what that means.
Well, Timmy, it means that now you can hear things coming from different directions. You might have seen the first movie ever to use this method, Disney's Fantasia.
Golly, I wish I could see that movie, but Mom's too busy spending all our money buying milk from the milkman.
Okay, Timmy, time to go.
Unfortunately, stereophonic sound wasn't really made commercial until the late 1960s with the invention of the cassette tape. Magnetic recordings, such as that found in cassette tapes, became the backbone of the modern musical age. The 80s ushered in a whole new era of inventions: Rubik's Cubes, breakdancing, Ronald Reagan. But none were bigger than the compact disc, or better known by its nickname, the CD. Dude, this is some righteous sound quality coming from this CD. I know, man, and it can totally hold like 70% more information than a cassette. Mondo cool. For some, the CD was thought to be the end-all be-all of sound mediums. That is, until the early 2000s, when the world was introduced to MP3 formats, the first and most popular format for digitally presenting audio. Many took advantage of this intangible media, creating products that could store music in numbers once thought impossible. MP3s are still, to this day, considered to be the best format for storing and transferring audible media. And with the time between groundbreaking inventions decreasing with each new era, it's easy to predict where the sound industry is headed. In 10 years, robots will be the central workforce in most first-world countries, and professional speaker amplifiers will be shrunken down to the size of small fruits, able to fill a room with bass-pumping crystal-clear audio. In 20 years, robots will have taken over, turning every man, woman, and child into their own personal flesh slave. But fear not, for every smartphone will have better audio recording software and hardware than those that are professionally available today. In 30 years, when the remaining humans are just beginning to emerge from the rubble left from a vicious but fruitful man versus robot revolution, they will look into their hands and see devices able to produce sound so clear and so lifelike that it will seem like their now lost society is still bustling and humming with life. It is when we look back on these immense changes over the span of a few hundred years that we realize the audio and sound industry is an ever-expanding idea that will not stop growing and shows no signs of slowing.